what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today I want to talk to you guys actually a little bit about the recent PC Gamer Ian Hazzikostas interview, in which they talked a bit about PVE gearing feeling unrewarding at this current point in Shadowlands. Now, I've played Shadowlands ever since the very first invite wave of alpha, and this was a slight concern, I would say, as far as like the community went over the course of alpha and beta. But I think one of the big things is that we actually really didn't see a whole lot of raids being cleared, as much Mythic Plus being done, farmed, and we had a lot of gear vendors in the game that actually made things a bit easier to obtain. But over the course of launch, up until this point, I guess till this point, things do feel a bit unrewarding. So I want to reference the actual article here first, talk about why I feel these things have happened, and then give some possible hopeful solutions to the actual issue. Now, for the most part here, one big topic of discussion has been the way loot works in the Shadowlands endgame. We significantly reduced the rate at which players earn item rewards, but at the same time also stripped away randomness and tried to give everyone more clear goals to pursue and control over their progress towards them. When it comes to PvP itemization specifically, we're really happy with how it's playing out. We think we can do more to make the experience of running dungeons and raids, I'm really glad they highlighted both here, feel more satisfying when you don't get a specific item you're hoping for. Now, and they do reference Valor and things here, which we'll get to in a little bit, but I wholeheartedly agree with this. I feel that Conquest, for the most part, really has been a great system when it comes to Shadowlands. I mean, it is the best gearing system in the game at this point. You know, running rated battlegrounds, it might take an actual eternity to hit 1800, 2100, 2400, but once you hit it, you're there, and you can use 2s and 3s to get honor, to get conquest, and pretty much, well, honestly, buy whatever you want. But when you look at it from a PvE perspective, raids really aren't dropping much gear. A mythic boss kill has 20 people in and 3 items drop. Mythic Plus, if you complete the key, you get 2 pieces of gear, barring going really high, and if you fail it, you get 1 piece of gear. And seeing as how we're in the very first patch of Shadowlands, there's a lot of gear like trinkets, certain items, trinkets, weapons, helms, whatever, what have you, rings in Mythic Plus that people are after more so than others. We don't have OP trinkets from, let's say, you know, Eternal Palace like we saw in Nilotha. They're farming Mythic Plus more and more often, and loot really doesn't feel as rewarding. I wholeheartedly agree with that. However, outside of that, I also think there's a few other things that need to be mentioned. I mean, so we obviously have the removal of Mythic Plus loot, or I guess a lack thereof. We have the removal of Mythic Plus or raiding gear, like Mythic Nilotha gear. 3 drops per boss is really not something that's very what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a whole lot when you have a raid of 20 actual raiders. And let's be real here, if your guild I feel has any kind of common goal in mind, whether it's like Hall of Fame or cutting edge, obviously world first, you're using master loot. If an item drops for you that you looted yourself, but it's tradable, it's not yours. It might be assigned to you and then you get to keep it, but if it's tradable, it's not yours until it's assigned to you. That's just how progression rating works. It's for the betterment of the team, and if that's the biggest upgrade for you and you get it, that's great. That's awesome. But that's always felt bad over the course of time, really ever since, you know, master loot went away and personal loot became a thing. Now, I understand that fully, wholeheartedly, but the fact of the matter is, when you're running a raid for 2, 3, 4 weeks in a row and you don't get a single drop for 2 weeks in a row, like for the most part what's happened with a handful of people in my guild, it feels pretty bad. You know, I think for the most part people have gotten used to master loot being a thing, loot trading being a thing, and that's not even talking about world first split runs and, you know, master loot there, which I think you know, this system actually encourages a lot more split runs. We saw this tier, I believe Pieces and Echo running 9 split runs, which is actually just absurd compared to limits 3 or 4. I think it actually encourages that behavior, which I doubt Blizzard is very happy with, but I think at this point there's probably not really a whole lot they can do about it, and they probably just accepted it at a certain point. But outside of the actual like Mythic Castle Nathria, Mythic Plus loot being removed, there's 2 things that have sort of flown under the radar, I feel, that haven't really been discussed. Probably the 2 biggest things outside of that being removed are, number 1, coins in Shadowlands. So I believe, looking back, I can remember as far back as Warlords of Draenor, where I think you had a max of 9 coins you could store up, 3 every single week for a max of 9, and that gave you so many extra bonus rolls on bosses in the raid. And the good thing with bonus rolls, I guess dungeons too, depending what you want, but the good thing with bonus rolls was that you could pretty much use them wherever, and you could use them over and over and over. If you wanted to run, let's say, Shadowlord Iskar 10 times, or I guess 9, you could go in there and coin him 9 times if you had 9 coins, trying to get that trinket 9 times. You could do that for any boss in the game, any dungeon in the game, and try and target that one specific item. Coins being removed really hurts that a lot. It also made things feel a decent bit better in the raid when you looted the boss and you looted gold, but then you still had that option of coining the boss. I personally really enjoyed planning out my coins every single tier when it opened up. I want to coin this boss, and this boss. If I get loot from this boss, though, I'll coin this one. And saving up, planning all that out, I think was it was an awesome part of the game to me. And seeing them removed, gradually being decreased in actual, I guess, raw count over the course of WoD into Legion into BFA, and then just removed from the game, I think it's really hurt the player base with gearing even more. It also makes loot trading even harder once again, because less loot in the actual raid, less loot in the actual just group guild. It makes things a bit rough. The fourth thing, though, and this is one thing that I am actually really disappointed with in Shadowlands. I think Shadowlands is great for what it's worth. I've had a great time playing it. I think it feels a bit unrewarding right now because of the lack of gear in PvE. Is that professions have never felt any less relevant. I was actually really excited to see professions heading into Shadowlands and what they were doing with them, seeing, unique enchants and gems and different things coming back, legendaries being a thing for, tailors and leather workers and, different professions, whatever, what have you. But there's no gear that you can make for them outside of legendaries. Like, I think the only profession that has a BOP item is alchemy for the trinket, and it sucks. Let's be real, it sucks. It's never good. So, looking back to how BFA was, you could make, I believe it was gloves and legs for tailors, and like leather workers and blacksmiths and jewel crafters can make rings and necks. They were all BOP, but you could upgrade them, you can make them and upgrade them and roll like the right secondary stats on them. And it added a lot of value to tailoring or whatever, because you can make, heroic level gear week 1. You can make mythic level gear for your own character week 2. Now, we're not going all the way back to the likes of Frozen Shadowy from Burning Crusade, but it's still relevant. And that missing from this expansion, I think, has hurt things even more so. Now, a very good way to work around that, if Blizzard was worried about gear trading and things being a thing from that profession crafting system, is just to make it a tiny bit lower eye level wise from heroic, from mythic. You would still want to craft those pieces, especially with the right secondary stats on them, but it wouldn't totally allow all the loot trading early on. If you remember back to, I believe, BOD, Method actually spent a lot of gold going into it, making every single player in their guild pick up engineering, make the mythic engineering helm, equip it, and then go back to whatever profession they had before, because it allowed mythic Azerite helm trading in the raid, which once again made gearing a lot better. Now, that might not be something that Blizzard loved to see, but in the end, like, having professions feel so unrewarding right now and just so irrelevant. I don't think they've ever felt this relevant in the past almost at all. Now, I do think the actual conquest gearing system in game feels really good right now. Like I said, you push whatever rating you want, 16, 18, 21, 2400 in raid of battlegrounds, which are easily the best way to do them. Then just farm conquest and farm honor in 2s and 3s, whatever you want to do, and buy items from there. That's great. It feels like it's one of the best systems they've ever had for PvP gearing, but then they just left PvE by itself. And listen, I've been on both sides of the fence. I don't PvP a whole lot, but you've often had to go into arenas to get the best PvE gear. I had to do it in Nilotha, and you often have to go into PvE events like raiding, whatever, what have you, for the high-end PvP trinkets like you saw in Nilotha as well. It goes both ways. I love both sides of the community. I love you both. Don't worry. I'm just saying, in general, the conquest system is so much better than any PvE system we have now. It's actually insane. So, with that being said, like, I do think there are a lot of ways Blizzard could turn this around quite easily. The first way I think Blizzard could address this issue, and it's probably the simplest way, but the most time-saving, most efficient way to do it, is just quite simply to increase the actual drop rate of items in raiding in Mythic Plus. Now, I know, like I said, that seems like a bit of a cop-out, and I think, or just an easy way out, and I think it sort of is. But in the end, I think anything helps. Running a Mythic Plus dungeon, whether it's one you finish or deplete, looting 35 anima at the end of a dungeon feels absolutely terrible. We need like 100,000 anima to upgrade our sanctum and everything else. 35 anima feels terrible. It's like looting a title core in BFA and you need like 10,000 to make a pair of boots. It feels really, really bad. That needs to be looked at first of all, I feel, and really hopefully get that into a better place. I would assume that's a pretty easy fix, and it probably doesn't really affect a whole lot of the player base. I know for myself, I've upgraded my Sanctum 3 times. I have like 30 souls I'm sitting on because I don't have enough anima, and I don't care enough to go farm it up from a million places. So that could be an easy first fix. Number 2, though, and we talked about it a little bit a second ago, I think actually introducing professions again, or introducing BOP gear in professions like we had in BFA, like tailoring, leatherworking, blacksmithing, jewel crafting, even engineering, maybe make a belt, give it a throwback to, I don't know, the socketed belt days, would make things a lot more relevant, make professions a lot more relevant, and make them feel a lot better. Honestly, I can't tell you what 2 professions my warlock is in game right now. I have no idea. Like I truly cannot tell you. I know. Okay, I think we can actually look. I think I'm an alchemist and a tailor. There we go. Like it's actually insane how irrelevant they are at this point. I don't use them for anything. And there might be little ways to make gold here and there, but for the most part, they're just so irrelevant at this point. You don't use them for gear. The one item you get from BOP from professions is the trinket from alchemy, and it sucks. It's never been good. I'm sorry. Maybe it's good for one spec, but the spec's probably never been good either. It's just not very good. Now, I don't want this to make I'm complaining about it. I really enjoyed looking at professions in alpha and beta. I was really excited for them to come back and be relevant again. And it's cool seeing like the new enchants and some of the new things that they haven't had in a while. But I don't think professions have ever felt any less relevant at this point. Like I said, I can't even really remember what I have. I know I'm an alchemist because I have 2-hour flask, I believe. Like I said, but I already forgot. It's just really that bad. So like I said, I think just introducing more gear into the actual PVE environment would make things feel a lot better. And technically you can make the case for profession gearing being PvP based too. It's great. The conquest gearing system right now feels so good. Like I said, I just wish there was a bit more when it came to PvE. Now, like I mentioned as well, I do think it's sort of a cop out, like just, okay, here's more gear, have fun. I think they could do better than that. So I want to talk about a few more systems that we've seen in the past. I think some of you guys probably know what I'm getting at, but I think the introduction of Valor, maybe Badges of Justice, would do so much for this game and make it feel so much better in basically every scenario. Let's start off with Badges of Justice. I think one of the best systems we could see returning is the actual Badge of Justice system. Now, for those of you who aren't 30 like me and haven't played the game since basically Burning Crusade, Badges of Justice were essentially like tokens that dropped from bosses in Burning Crusade Heroics and Raid dungeons. Now, Heroics in Burning Crusade were actually a lot more difficult than they are nowadays. Heroics were the highest difficulty you could go. They dropped epic gear at the end, and the badges could be used to also buy epic gear from a vendor. So basically, they're the equivalent of like Mythic 0, probably Mythic Plus, sort of. There were no affixes, but they were the hardest dungeon difficulty you could do. I actually remember when Magister's Terrace came out in the Sunwell patch, and that was a bit rough on Mythic the first few weeks. But regardless, all bosses dropped 1 badge, and in Raid you can get up to 2, but you could use these badges to actually purchase gear. Now, the cool thing about badges was that there was so much gear you could buy. The later gear here, like the 128 gear you bought from the Isle of Qualdanas, or Qualthalos, I think, one of the two. Which island is it? Let's see here. It's this thing. It's up here. We're flying there now. It's this thing, Qualdanas. There you go. But you bought it from that island, and it was really good gear. Now, it has a gold cost here, because they've all been replaced with gold at this point. But even like when you first started off, I remember Talisman of Caligos being something from like Karazhan level that I bought with my offhand. I remember later on looking at the Fetish of Primal Gods being like, okay, man, I know that in X weeks, for example, this is my best offhand I can get. I can pair this with this item from the raid, and I know that if I go into every dungeon and every raid and kill every boss and get the max amount of badges I can get, in X days, X weeks, I can have my best piece of gear. Now, in modern day times, that might vary a bit. You might get a best piece of gear from the raid or something like that. But if you're not raiding high-end content, this was a great, amazing way to get access to decent gear by being engaged in, I guess you could say, lower, more remedial level content over the course of a few weeks. it gave players that high end, okay, I can strive for this in 5 weeks. In 5 weeks, for example, I know that I can get my wand. I actually remember this wand, which is sad, but I do. I remember saying, this is actually pretty legit. I want this wand. I believe it had haste on it a while ago, maybe. But whether it's wands, cloaks, helms, main hands, offhands, trinkets, two-handed weapons, having that long-term goal, I can get this piece of gear. And I know when I get this, I'm essentially done, is something that the game is missing right now. This number one keeps players engaged in lower level content in a sense. I mean, whether they drop from Mythic Zeros or Mythic Plus, or maybe they drop more in Mythic Zeros comparatively to Plus once a week, which would, you know, behoove you to run Mythic Zeros. It keeps players engaged in lower level content, which, I mean, let's be real here. It's good for the game. It's good for players looking to gear other characters up. And it's also good for those players who are grinding out the badges, because they'll fly through it. They'll be able to trade lower level gear to those players potentially, and also be working towards a high-end goal. It sort of reminds me of Valor in WoD, which we'll get to in a second here. But having it as maybe a reward, Mythic Plus, as well at the end, would also make Mythic Plus feel more rewarding, because maybe you don't loot gear, but maybe you loot like 2 badges and maybe some anima, and that's still working towards your end goal. Now, you probably have to cap the amount of badges you can get from Plus every week, probably the raid to a certain extent, but it would feel so much more rewarding running Mythic Plus and knowing, okay, I might not have gotten, you know, the trinket I'm striving for, the changeling from Tier Size, for example, but I got 3 badges, and I know at 300 badges I can buy this trinket here, which is essentially the same thing. Like, that's the kind of system I think WoW is missing right now in PvE. In PvP, you have that. You have the honor, you have conquest, you have grinding, raiding. You don't really have that in PvE. So having a system like this, where you could say, okay, for example, I don't have a great chest in the raid. I have a 213 chest right now. It's fine, but is it where the rest of my gear is to the raid? No, I can't get one to drop. They won't drop for us in the raid because 3 items drop per boss. And guess what? When it drops, every cloth in the raid is going to want it because they aren't dropping. But it would be great to say, you know what? In 2 weeks, I can instead go here and buy this chest. I don't think it's a chest here, a chest, for example, and get that out of the way. That would be great. It keep me engaged in content. It keep me raiding even more. It would keep me. I'd want to kill every boss every week. Like, I remember back to Legion, I ran every single difficulty of every single raid. LFR, normal, heroic, and mythic. Even old mythic raids, I'd pug them for the most chances at legendaries every single week. I was the first person to get them all in my guild. I was the first person to get token legendaries for alts in my guild. It's just a really good system, and we haven't really seen anything like this, I believe, since WoD, a badge system. We've seen Valor here and there, which we'll get to in a minute. I think that's also something pretty important in itself. But I think a badge system would be a really, really good welcome change to Warcraft. So, like I said, speaking of badges, Valor is also another system. It's very, very good, and one realistically that players have been asking for more so than badges to come back for a while. So looking all the way back to, I think WoD was the last time we saw Valor being a thing here. It's still, it would still be incredibly relevant at this point in time. So essentially the way you acquired Valor was you went into Mythic Zero dungeons. Remember, Mythic Plus was not a thing in Warlords of Draenor. It came out in Legion. So you would have to go through, I believe there's an actual summary here. Let's see. You have an actual first heroic warlord dungeon of the day, 100 Valor, 300 from completing each mythic dungeon for the first time each week, 2,400 per week if all 8 are completed. This was great. I remember doing this with friends, like on the weekend, just going through, destroying every dungeon, but dragging someone's alt along, or getting somebody from LFG. Hey, I have no gear. Cool. It's going to take half an hour to do all 8. Come with us, get some gear. Even if you're just doing it in a guild group, blasting through it, disenchanting all the gear, it keeps players engaged in current content. And personally, to me, it didn't feel like a chore. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. It would behoove you to do it. It's probably the best you could do to like min-max your Valor, but it keeps players engaged in content they otherwise wouldn't be doing. Shadowlands feels great right now, outside of the PVE rewards, but I think this would be a big step in the right direction for just players actively just playing the game and giving them a progression scale for their main character, even their alts. 500 from the weekly bonus quest. You have PvP quest weekly, which are fine with conquest and all that kind of stuff now. And then you also have, the pet battle quest or weekly dungeon quest. I'm sure you could work this in some way. Now, even back in Burning Crusade, talking a bit about badges here, we have weekly dungeon quests in Shadowlands. You could quite easily work Valor into those as well. There's 2 in the bottom of Oribos, which I forget every single week. You could work Valor into those as well. So you have like multiple sources of Valor. Obviously the raid, even put in LFR if you want. LFR, normal, heroic, mythic, dungeons, mythic plus. Mythic plus might take a bit of tweaking and tuning though. Now, Blizzard has mentioned that Valor is on their radar. I believe I talked about it in beta, I believe in one of Ian's interviews. So that's a good thing to hear. But the question is when, and will it actually be a thing? Now, looking at how well Conquest has gone over for PvP, I would assume that they probably want some kind of system like this in place for PvE. The question really is just when and how do they want to implement it with Mythic Plus really being a thing? Chances are you probably have to cap the Valor in Mythic Plus per week and then, give other options here like Mythic Zeros, this and that. You could just straight up cap Valor at 5k, for example, and go acquire it all from Mythic Plus, which I guess would still keep players engaged in content more than others, depending how you're doing. But the big thing is, it would make Mythic Plus, it would make raiding feel so much more rewarding. Still working towards, once again, that common goal, whether it's actual gear upgrade, or if you go back to Legion eras and have the actual random gear upgrades being a thing too. Because think back to Legion, you could actually push your gear 5 eye levels twice for 10 eye levels. Now, once again, you needed a pretty good bit of Valor to do this, but you knew, for example, that, okay, in 2 weeks, I can max out my chest here. In 2 weeks, I can do this. In 2 weeks, I can do that. And this acted as a gradual power gain over the course of a tier, but and also being a slight nerf to content, which I think Blizzard probably wants that being the case. I don't think Blizzard loves going in and having the nerf content every couple months or so once initial prog is over, right? Similar to Reorigination Array in Old Deer, Valor upgrades on gear act as minor little nerfs to content once the Race to World First is over and things just, once you progress more and more, content will gradually get a tiny bit easier. You'll still have the mechanic checks like Gorfiend in HFC, like a couple other bosses like Maiden in Tomb of Sargeras, but content gradually gets a little bit easier over the course of a tier. It makes planning gear upgrades so much better, so much easier. And the big thing is, depending how they implement this with Mythic Plus, they could very easily just take this system and make it so that whatever items you get in plus, let's say for example a 226 cube is best for you. I've got news for you, cube's really not best for anybody, I don't think, because it's a trap. But let's say for example a 226 cube is best for you from the Great Vault, whatever. Let's say you have a 210 cube dropping Mythic Plus, or a 213, right? Now, I don't think you should be able to push that cube to the max eye level, but maybe giving that cube, that weapon, or that item from Mythic Plus 2 potential upgrades as well. So 213 baseline drop could become 223, which is probably where you want to cap it, because keeping the Great Vault relevant once again is relevant and probably what you want to do. But it would actually make items drop in plus. Let's say it may be a lower difficulty, or maybe an item you don't really want right now, but you can save it in your bags and upgrade it later, and it gives you an actual goal to strive for, besides just running the same dungeon over and over and over, trying to get one piece of gear and then hoping to get your best item in the Great Vault, or you're just not getting it at all at that level. That feels bad. But bringing Valor back gives you a great way to work towards high-end goals, nerfs to content in a sense over the course of Valor upgrades and things, and really just keeping the player base more engaged in the game, keeping people running Mythic Zeros where they wouldn't necessarily be doing, giving you small little incremental ways for your main character or even alts to gain power. Having Valor back, badges, more Valor. I'll take either or, but having either back would be such a huge step in the right direction for the PvE part of WoW. I think PvP Conquest, this is probably the best gearing system they have had PvP, probably almost ever. I guess you can maybe make reference to BC gearing and things being a thing as well, but there's just not much for PvE. If they were able to bring back Valor or badges with a bit of tweaking in PvE, I think this version of WoW, Shadowlands being a thing, this version of WoW gearing would probably be the best we've ever seen. Oh, by the way, there's one more thing that I do want to talk about a bit here too, and it's coins, hopefully coming back at a certain point. So, as mentioned, coins have essentially been removed from the game at this point. Now, in Warlords of Draenor, let's admit here, they were probably a bit excessive. You could save like 9 coins going into the tier, I guess the next tier. You had so many rolls of gear and rerolls every single week potentially that it became a bit excessive. Going into BFA and things, you were limited to 5 coins per week, and that felt okay. You could probably make a case for that being a tiny bit excessive as well, heading into like a new tier and things, but it added an element of RNG, but fun RNG. And like, how do you word this? I guess just fun to the game. You looked at certain bosses you wanted the coin, unless you looted a certain item from them, then you can maybe hold that coin for a different boss and a different boss, and it added so much fun to the game. It made it really exciting to me. I really enjoyed having that around in PFA. But when Shadowlands came out, there really wasn't a whole lot that you could do. It's just coins are gone. Everything's gone. Coins are gone. No loot dropping. No this, no that, no Valor, no badges. I think outside of Valor and badges coming back, the next best thing they could do is probably introduce coins again. Now, I'm not saying we need to be able to buy 3 coins a week in a max of 10 or 12 or whatever. That's crazy excessive, and that would inject so much extra gear into the actual economy. It would make things excessive. But one thing that Blizzard also mentioned in alpha and beta was that they're looking at bringing tier gear back to a certain extent in Shadowlands. Now, we haven't really heard a lot about that, but we talked about it. Tettles and I did a bit during the Race to World First. If they're bringing tier gear back, how are you going to acquire that tier gear when there's 3 items dropping in a rate of 20 and it's going to be, there's no coins? It's going to be an actual nightmare trying to acquire your tier gear, unless they bring back some kind of, I don't know, some kind of system where they have maybe like an item dropping that puts that actual like set bonus on this piece of gear. So you maybe put it on like, okay, this is my best helm that maybe I got through Valor or badges, and then you can put that like 1/2 of that bonus on that piece of gear and then put the other one on a different one. Now, I could see that potentially being a thing, but even with that being the case, you're already just having such little loot dropping in the raid. You can't farm it. And plus, I think coins are probably, like, outside of badges and Valor, the biggest thing they could bring back to this game to make PvE gearing feel a bit more relevant. I know that it might feel pretty RNG, and let's be real here, I have terrible luck. It sucks coining a boss 8 times in a row and getting gold, or I guess 25 anima, whatever the reward would be, but it would still inject more gear into the actual gearing economy and just game as a whole. And like I said, any guild that's probably running high-end raiding, looking to do Hall of Fame, even cutting edge, is probably using master loot. It would make gear trading a thing earlier, which would make getting your own character easier earlier. I think Blizzard has done a great job with Shadowlands, but there's been 1 or 2 little things that have probably been a bit excessive. And I think trimming the coins is one of those. I would say maybe having like 1 coin purchasable per week and like a max of 4 would be fine. So if you want to save for the next tier, you can't coin a boss for a month, or maybe I guess 5 weeks, 3 weeks, however you want to look at it. But that could be a thing. It's not that you're buying 4 coins per week and saving up 12 for the day the raid opens. And you have a max of 4. If you can buy 1 a week, okay, great. But you can't coin a boss for a month. I think that's a solid middle ground, and one that Blizzard probably needs to find before they reintroduce tier gear, or you're probably going to be hearing a lot more about no gear dropping and coins not being a thing. I suppose they could make tier gear purchasable for Valor or badges, but that's something in itself. Wanted to buy Valor, wanted to buy badges, and hey, I'll take some coins on the side too. For the most part though, I do think Shadowlands is an awesome expansion. Like I said, PvP gearing feels insane. The Conquest honor system they have right now feels great. Most of my guild is more geared from PvP than we are PvE, and we're working on Stone Legion General's Mythic right now. We've re-cleared every week. That's sort of sad on its own, but the good thing is Blizzard has acknowledged that there probably is a bit of an issue with PvE based gearing, and hopefully they're looking more towards a system like Valor or badges or coins. The fact that they actually reference Valor in beta as well, fingers crossed, but I'm hoping Valor returns. Valor, badges, coins, 1, 2, 3. But in the end, I'll take any of them. Thanks for watching, guys. I know this video is a little different than what I normally put out, mainly being like PvE based raid warlock content, but I figured it was something that's worth talking about. Like I said, Shadowlands, I do truly feel feels amazing. The raid's great. The dungeons are actually insane. The zones are incredible. And I think for the most part, covenants and things have sort of died down in a good way. People have accepted the fact that, hey, I'm a Night Fae or I'm whatever, and really looked at the other aspects of the game. Let me know what you guys think of these suggestions in the comment section below. And if you guys have some of your own, also feel free to leave them down there. I'll be sure to get back to you. If you guys want to see any more WoW content, be sure to hit the subscribe button below and hit the like button while you're down there as well. Thanks again, dudes, and I'll catch you all again soon on stream. Peace.